All right, in this video, I'm going to kind of follow up on a 1 month sort of ownership review that I did on my 21 Toyota Tundra Trd Pro. But I'm going to do a kind of a 2-for-1 in this video, so I'm going to do a follow up on this, as well as kind of talk about our 21 Land Cruiser Heritage Edition that we've had. So this will make now roughly 10 months since we've bought the Land Cruiser, and around 8 months since I got the Tundra. We got both vehicles from McGeorge Toyota in Richmond, Virginia. John Waters was our sales guy, and he was great to work with. We essentially got both vehicles for MSRP. What started the search was that we kind of were starting to look for a Land Cruiser when we found out that this was going to be the last official year of the V8 Land Cruiser in America, at least. So around February of 2021, last year, we started looking around for any places that had the dark gray Heritage Edition in stock or en route from Japan. And so McGeorge actually did. They had one that was on the way from Japan. So we went ahead and made it official and got this. And then at the same time, we were looking to kind of downsize from 3 vehicles to 2. And we had an old Ford F-150, a 2010 F-150 single cab. And then I had a 2018 Honda Accord, 2-liter Touring. It was one of the first ones off the line of that first model year of the new 10th generation Accord. And while that was a great car, we decided to get these 2 vehicles specifically because they both have basically the same 5.7 liter V8 engine that is essentially bulletproof. So we wanted to buy these vehicles to drive them for at least the next 20 years, which is what our plan is. So taking into all the different factors into account, that's why we ended up with these 2 vehicles, because we were gonna keep these for the long term. And these both essentially have been around for years and years, and not much had changed between model years except for little things here and there. So they're tested and proven and reliable, and those were the big selling points. So what I thought I would kind of do is just kind of talk about some of the things from an ownership perspective that you might not see on YouTube from very many people about these vehicles. You see the little kind of wannabe auto journalists that have kind of taken over YouTube. There are many different channels out there. Everybody's trying to make money off of their videos and to play auto journalist. I'm just going to give the perspectives from an actual person who owns and drives these vehicles every day, and hopefully they'll be helpful for people who are specifically looking for used examples of these, because so essentially right now you cannot buy a new Land Cruiser in the US. If you want a new Land Cruiser, you essentially have to buy the new Lexus LX 600, which is essentially the new Land Cruiser 300 series, but it's of course the Lexus version, so it's kind of gussied up a little bit. Or Toyota just recently announced the new Sequoia, the 23 Sequoia. That is essentially on the same platform now, the new global platform that the Land Cruiser 300 series is on for the other world markets, as well as the new 22 Tundra and the Lexus LX 600. But if you want an actual Toyota Land Cruiser in America, you cannot buy a new one anymore. So this is the last run of the 200 series that was available for the US market. And of course, this is not the normal version. This is the Heritage Edition version. So that means that there are no running boards. There's some slight differences in the front related to the grille, and some of the chrome sort of removed. That chrome strip that normally you would see that runs across the side of the body on a normal one is also gone. And then of course you get the special Heritage Edition wheels and the special Land Cruiser script here on the side on the D-pillar. There's some other things. There was no, in the last year, there was no third row seat, so the third rows were completely removed, which is great. It was one of the big reasons why we wanted it, because the Land Cruisers, if anybody knows, if anybody's familiar, they're not really large on the inside. So having the extra room in the back, because the third row in those are a joke, and nobody can actually sit in them unless they're a little kid anyway. So anyway, we've had this Land Cruiser since April of last year, and I just kind of wanted to go over a couple of things that, from my perspective, that we've really liked about it, and the only very sparse few things that that I'm not thrilled about in the Land Cruiser, but it's a trade-off. It's a trade-off that anybody who ended up buying one, I mean, it's just one of those things that you know about, and it's kind of related to the interior, the technology related to the infotainment situation. But those are kind of minor things that are just sort of weren't a big deal to me, and they also weren't a big deal to Emily either. You'll see that we actually removed the roof basket. So the Heritage Edition also comes with the Yakima roof basket. I took it off because it basically just made it really difficult to just take this through a car wash when we needed to wash it. And as you see here, it needs to be washed, but we'll get to that sometime soon. We've had some snow and ice, and it's been washed once since that, but we've also gotten some more rain and stuff, so it's not super clean. But so what are the other things about, and I'll probably do some additional videos on the Land Cruiser specifically, because we're also planning to we've already got a quote, but we're not moving forward yet, but we're going to get an ARB front bull bar and a worn winch installed on the front end. And then we're going to get a new rad flow suspension to make up for the added weight on the front. And then probably eventually we'll also relocate the spare tire, which currently as standard lives under the kind of the back cargo area, to make room for an auxiliary fuel tank, because one of the things we'll get into on the Land Cruiser specifically is that the 5.7 liter V8 is very thirsty, and the tank on this Land Cruiser is kind of a joke. It's way too small. That's not the case on the Tundra, by the way. The Tundra has a huge 38-gallon tank, and I can go like 580 miles on a tank of gas in the Tundra, which is great. But the Land Cruiser is a different story. So eventually, with the first phase will be that we'll get the ARB front bumper, the winch, and the suspension upgrade. And then a second phase will probably be to get a rear bumper situation, probably one of those SLE rear bumpers that will hold the spare tire, so that we can relocate the spare tire and install the auxiliary gas tank to be able to hold more gas. Otherwise, we're not really going to do anything else to the Land Cruiser. We'll also put on some beefier all-terrain tires as well. But maybe I'll just go ahead and get in here for a second and actually start it up. So this actually won't be a cold start, because we got back from running around about an hour ago, but I'm going to start it up. So one of the key differences, and I'll kind of compare between the Tundra and this, since they have the same engine, they have very different characteristics as far as how the engine sounds within the inside of the vehicle, as well as actually the overall character of, you know, the way the two vehicles actually drive. So with the Land Cruiser, of course, the Land Cruiser has full-time four-wheel drive. So there is a center diff. There's actually a center diff lock here as an option when you're in 4 low. But normal driving, you're in 4 high all the time. And it just, you know, the diff knows that when you're taking turns that it needs to adjust. But the characteristics of the way the engine sounds when you're just driving, you get pretty much from inside, you get no exhaust sounds. So it's essentially all engine sounds is what you hear. And so it kind of has a different character than the Tundra does. Let me make sure that that's off. That's on and that's off. Okay. So, and we'll get to the Tundra. It's got a special Trd Pro exhaust, which is very cool. Sounds really nice. But this one is, you know, very, you know, luxurious, to say one word. So even though this is a Toyota, it's built in Japan. I think anybody who has experienced these Land Cruisers will say, at least the ones that are sold, you know, for the American market, or that were sold in the American market, these are basically Lexuses. I mean, they're that level of quality, that level of solidness when you get in and you touch things. I mean, there's some things like this material that's not really super high end by any means. You know, like the little plastic pieces here, but everything is just kind of a next level of quality. And the way this vehicle feels when you're driving it, it feels like you can just drive it through the apocalypse, which is, you know, one of the big things that we wanted. The other reason why we both got off-road capable vehicles is that we have we're going to be going back and forth to a place up in the mountains, and we wanted to just be able to not worry about making it up, and also getting around the actual property. So it's a little chunk of property, and we just want to be able to get where we want to go. And then eventually we'll probably also have some fun. We actually took this Land Cruiser to Emily and I did a 2-day off-road driving course at Overland Experts in Uwharrie, and we worked with Tony, and it was great. We learned a lot. We actually learned, we kind of learned the ropes in a 100 series Land Cruiser, and we really kind of beat it up. But then at the end of the second day, we brought, you know, we drove there in this both days, but at the end of the second day, we actually took this out on several of the trails that we had gone on previously in the 100 series, just to kind of, you know, be able to drive our own vehicle and get a sense for how it performs off-road. And it was great, and we will probably do it again at some point after we do some of the other work that I mentioned before. So in general, you've probably seen plenty of videos where people talk about all the details of the how all this stuff works, but I'll just say that the interior, like the dials here, are just classic to me, and they're really well laid out, and I really like the way this overall kind of feels. It almost feels like this is a high-end, you know, if anybody's familiar with watches and familiar with Seiko and Grand Seiko, this is kind of like the Grand Seiko of instrumentation in a Japanese vehicle to me. All the dials are really crisp and neatly laid out, and I appreciate that. So in general, this vehicle is really great to drive. The visibility in this always amazes me if I haven't driven this in a while and I've been driving my truck, because there is a pretty big difference. Visibility in this is outstanding, especially considering the driving position. I'm kind of up a little bit, and I'm 6 feet tall, but this gives you a really great vantage point when you're actually driving. It's just a great vehicle to drive. So to some of the points that are slight drawbacks that people just should be aware of if they're looking at these. The biggest drawback that most people would talk about would be just the overall infotainment system. It's kind of old school. It's like last generation Toyota as far as that instrumentation and all that. The elements related to, the navigation system, and there's no Apple CarPlay or Android Auto in this, which to me would be, that was one of the things that I was a little disappointed about initially, but I knew going into it that there was no, Android Auto or Apple CarPlay. And the reality of the situation is that you can still just plug your phone in and play any music that you want to play from any of your streaming services. It just takes a little additional work to do that. But so that no Apple CarPlay is one slight ding, if you can call it a ding. To me, I don't really care about frivolous bells and whistles and some of the things that you find in some vehicles now that are just kind of overkill that I never use anyway. So some of the things, since this is the middle of this is the beginning of February, and we just had some really cold weather in the past month here in North Carolina, is one thing that I've really valued is the heated steering wheel option, and of course the heated seats are also fantastic. One of the drawbacks to this vehicle is that there's no remote start, as a standard feature. So I am the remote start. I have to come out here early in the morning and start the vehicle for Emily before she goes to work, so that it's kind of warmed up. So it would have been nice to also have remote start, but that's just one other thing. The only other sort of negative aspect to this vehicle in general is, again, the small fuel tank. So we live in Burlington, North Carolina. We went to Greensboro and ran some errands this morning, and the fuel gauge at that point was closer to I would say maybe, I don't know, 4/5 of a tank. And so just that trip to Greensboro and back, which is not all that much, there's a visible change in the level of fuel that you have whenever you take any kind of trip. Even if it's 20-30 miles, you notice. So the smaller tank, I think there's a 24 to 25 gallon tank in this vehicle, and the V8, the 5.7 liter V8 is quite thirsty, so it would just have benefited from a larger tank from the beginning. So that's just the other kind of ding to this. We actually haven't really driven this in snow. I drove it in a little dusting that we had, and it performed flawlessly without me having to touch anything. I mean, I didn't change any of the settings. I didn't even enable this, second start. So I was still starting out in first gear and just driving like a normal, sensible person should drive in the snow, and it was completely fine. So I have no doubt that if you're in kind of the thicker stuff, that, in most cases this would do just fine. As far as like, let me go ahead and actually turn this back off. I just kind of started it just to kind of illustrate, although I didn't get out and get close to the exhaust or anything like that. But so as far as the room of this vehicle goes, we have this set up because we have 3 dogs, so there's plenty of dog hair. We have this Orvis seat cover back here that we lay down. We have these Orvis boxes that actually contain storage that you can throw all kinds of stuff in, and then it also acts as kind of like a little extra platform for the dogs. So as you see here, it's sort of level with the seat, and so that way when we're taking trips with the dogs, we just pile them up in here, and they just lay down back here. The leg room in the back seats is fairly lacking. You know, it's not great by any stretch of the imagination. I mean, it's enough for us because we don't have kids. There's nobody else that we really drive around in this vehicle, so it basically stays like this all the time. And when we need to take the dogs somewhere, we just load them up, and that works well. If you actually have passengers you're trying to drive around, the back seats aren't super spacious. They're not too bad. But one of the other things I really like about the 200 series is the two-part tailgate. So there's the first part that flips up, and then this part comes down. So it's like a little miniature tailgate here. The new 300 series does away with that, and there's just one large hatch that opens like other traditional SUVs that you see everywhere else now. So the new Land Cruisers lose the tailgate, which again I think is really cool. There's some storage on one side and a little toolbox that has all the different tools that you need to take care of the you know, if you need to change a tire or anything. And so then if you flip this up, you insert the little device that cranks right in there, and then you can lower the spare tire. So you can kind of see the top of the spare tires lives right down in there. So you can lower the spare down, get that out, and get the tires changed when you need to. But the 21 Heritage Edition, as I said before, completely does away with the third row seats. So there's no, you can see where the third row seats would have clipped in, but you know, you just get this all-weather mat, and you just get all this room in the back, which, you know, it's a fair amount for sure, which is good, because we need, when we take our trips and we had all the dogs loaded up, you know, we can really load up the entire back of this with very little room to spare. But overall, this is a really good road tripping vehicle. The other thing that a lot of people talk about in this vehicle that is considered a drawback, especially on long trips, just because it's a little tiring, is the fact that the steering is exceptionally heavy. The steering is very, very heavy. It's heavier than even, you know, if you're in a sports car and you have different settings that you can adjust, and you can put it into like the highest sportiness factor, the Sport Plus or Sport Sharp or whatever you want to call the extreme version. They usually tighten the steering up and make it a lot heavier. This steering in this vehicle by default is even heavier than the heaviest of those kind of steering settings that I've felt in some sports cars. So that is a factor that some people complain about. You kind of get used to it, and it is, I mean, it's heavy for sure, but you just, again, it's just one of the things that you sort of live with. So you can turn on and off the power for both the tailgate and the upper part, which is good, because if you do get, say, you know, a new rear bumper installed on the back, and it swings around like you see those SLE ones do with a spare tire or extra gas canisters, or, you know, high lift jack or whatever kind of stuff you want to put on the back to accessorize, you don't want to accidentally, you know, hit the power tailgate button and have it bumping up against that outer thing that needs to move first. So you can disable all that in the controls in the front, which is also kind of nice. So you can gently push it to a little bit and it'll pull itself the rest of the way up, or you can just slam it and it slams all the way shut. So that's kind of it. I'll just say in general, we've got a pretty significant number of miles on the Land Cruiser already, and we've taken it in for the first service several months ago, and it's just, you know, it hasn't skipped a beat. So it's great. I really enjoy when I get to drive it. Emily drives this every day, and I drive my truck when I need to drive it. Usually on the weekends, like today, I get to chauffeur her around, and I usually choose to drive her car just because I like driving it. So switching over to the Tundra. So this is that's a 21. This is a 21 Tundra TRD Pro. So there's the TRD Pro stamp. Those are the TRD Pro wheels. I got these side steps installed by the dealer. Other than the side steps and bed liner, there's no additional options or anything else on this truck. It's just the TRD Pro as it came standard. I've got way fewer miles on this than we have on the Land Cruiser because I don't drive to work. I work from home, and I very rarely have ventured out in the past year. So I go around, usually just around town, to do errands. I have a minuscule number of miles on this truck, especially for having had it for roughly 8 months now. I think I've got under 3,000 miles on it, so it's barely been driven. But in general, I really love driving this truck. Of course, in the TRD Pro, anybody who knows about the TRD Pros, we have a special TRD Pro Suspension. I'll kind of try and get some of this with the Fox shocks. There's a pretty good shot of that in the front. And the special TRD Pro wheels. So these wheels are really cool. They're the BBS forged wheels. I think this particular wheel is actually my favorite TRD Pro wheel that I've seen in recent years. The new one on the 22s, I don't like nearly as much as these. And the year previous to this one, I also don't really like very much. So I feel like I kind of lucked out on this one. Again, this is the last year of the V8 in the Tundra. So this again has the 5.7 liter V8. Let's see what else. So yeah, the rear, of course, the rear suspension. This is still on leaf springs, where I believe the 22s went to coils. So this is kind of, still sort of old school in the back. But I mean, this thing just cruises over big off-road, changes in terrain. Of course, it's definitely no F-150 Raptor, but it's considered kind of the poor man's Raptor, which I would support that, especially this versus the 22 is the poor man's Raptor, because this was I think roughly 55,000, and I think they just announced the pricing for the 22 Tundra TRD Pros, and it's a whopping $10,000 more. I think that one is like 65,000, which is insane to me, but I think prices in general are going up across the board. So that might be a very big reason why you might be taking the time and getting this far into this video to continue watching, if you're trying to find one of these used. I could probably sell this right now and either break even or maybe even make a little bit of money, because I think there are a lot of people out there that might not be convinced by, especially the first model year of a brand new car always comes with growing pains and issues and noise, harshness, and vibration, issues with just what happens when you have a first model year of a brand new platform and a brand new vehicle. So who knows how that twin turbo V6 will hold up over time, but the V8 in this is, of course, tried and true. Of course, so all that being said, I'm extremely glad that I got this versus, waiting to see what the new Tundra would be like, because the other thing, in my opinion, is this is one of the best looking trucks around, and the new 22 Tundra, I just don't like the way it looks. I don't think it looks, it's lacking in the looks department. Of course, the interiors are vastly different. So when you get inside this one, I'll go around to the other side real quick. When you get into this, it feels more like a Toyota. And what I mean by that is simply, you know, the parts in this are a little, they're certainly, you don't feel like you're in a Lexus when you get in this. You feel like you're in a Toyota. So, and I know a lot of this, and especially in a truck, a full-size truck is, you know, because you want things to be able to hold up to kind of getting banged around. And you know, if you're using this for a work truck and you're throwing stuff all, you know, in here, you don't want it to just get torn up immediately. So it's kind of built to hold up to some of the harshness that comes with just kind of what people expect out of a full-size truck. So there's plenty of differences between how this functions and how the 22 Trd Pro functions, because the new Trd Pro has basically adopted all of the kind of special bits and pieces from, it's benefited from the Land Cruiser. So there's, you know, they have the multi-terrain select in the new Tundra with the crawl control and all that stuff. I think, you know, I don't even remember if this is true or not. It may even have a locking rear differential. Maybe it doesn't, but I want to say on the Trd Pro, it now does have a locking rear diff, whereas this Tundra, even though it's the Trd Pro, all you get is 2-wheel drive, 4 high and 4 low. And then of course you've got A-track, but really the way that you adjust when you're driving off-road is maybe you either push the traction control button once to semi-disable some things, or you press and hold it to completely disable all the traction control, and then you just, you know, control everything with your feet like old school off-roaders do. So you're left foot brake, right foot gas, and then you're modulating what's going on. So driving this off-road, maybe a little, you know, you might be able to get a little farther when you're actually able to lock the rear diff in a new Trd Pro and take some of those obstacles, get a little bit farther. But this is going to do anything that I ever need it to do. So I'm not really feel like I'm missing out on anything. So driving this took some getting used to. In this model, this is one of the other differences between this and the new version, I believe. There's no blind spot monitoring, so nothing's going to flash up and tell you that there's somebody in your blind spot. And there are no parking sensors anywhere on this vehicle either. This thing is huge, so actually it takes some getting used to figure out exactly to feel the dimensions on this when you're parking in tight spots. So it becomes a little bit of a challenge. There's also no, you know, front-facing camera in this, whereas I think in the new Trd Pro and maybe even the Trd Off-Road Tundra, again, it's adopted some of the camera tech from the Land Cruiser platform. So I didn't show this in the Land Cruiser, but our 200 series Land Cruiser does have a front camera, and it's got, you know, when you're in 4 low, you can choose a couple of different views. The problem with that system is that it's so old and the cameras are pretty low res. It's actually, especially if you're kind of washed out, if there's a lot of sun or if the lighting is bad enough, it's almost unusable anyway. So you don't really get much benefit out of it in the 200 series, whereas maybe the new versions on the Tundra and the Land Cruiser probably have higher resolution cameras and are probably better executed. But so driving this, you just really have to get a sense for how big it is and where you're pointing it. It's also got a really long wheelbase, so you have to get used to making wider turns and making sure you're clearing things before you kind of make your turn-ins. Make sure that you're, you're kind of mid between the sort of the B pillar and C pillar before you kind of start making those turns, because you can run up on the curb pretty easily. But in general, this has held up really well as well. I haven't driven it many miles as I mentioned before. But let me go ahead and start this up, because the one last thing that I just want to bring up again on this vehicle is the different characteristic that this execution of this 5.7 liter V8 makes. And of course, a lot of that has to do with the Trd Pro Exhaust. So I'm going to turn it on. Little Tundra. So let me make sure I've got the, yep, I think I do. Nope, I didn't. Okay. So one of the beautiful things about this truck is the dual Trd Pro exhaust. So and this was truly a cold start. I haven't driven this car in 2 days. And it sounds fantastic. It sounds fantastic no matter how hard or kind of softly you're driving it. It just sounds great all the time. So get in now. So the engine is just a joy to listen to. A lot of times, if I'm just kind of driving, depending on the mood I'm in, I just completely turn the music off, as I've done here. And I just enjoy listening to the exhaust. It's got one of the best sounds of a V8 around, in my opinion. I mean, it sounds nice. So this Trd Pro, of course, I didn't go around to the front, but I'll get around to it. I also didn't mention this is in the special color for the 21 model year, so it's the Lunar Rock color. I've gotten so many compliments on this truck in general, and mostly it has to do with the color. People just really like the color, and I'm one of those people. I think the color is really interesting and unique, and depending on the time of day and where the sun is, and if it's partially cloudy or if it's full sun or if it's raining, it can look very different. So you get those different shades of the green and mixed in with the gray. And I've noticed over the past couple of years that these sorts of shades of color have become popular on many different makes and models. So I've seen them in like Hyundais and the new Honda Accord. And of course, the Toyota has used the Lunar Rock color on the RAV4, I think even before the Trd Pros got that special color for the 21 model year. So you'll start to see other vehicles with similar types of colors that really kind of pop and are really, really nice. The driving dynamics of this, there's much more drama involved in driving this truck versus driving the Land Cruiser. And what I mean really by that is that the exhaust is expressive. So even if you're just putting around town, if you just give it a little gas, you're going to get some excitement from the sounds that you hear, which can brighten your day for sure. But let's see, other than just the heft, the size of this vehicle, it takes some getting used to. It's really on the highway on longer trips. I have taken a few longer trips. This thing is a dream because it just kind of floats along. one of the cool things about the Trd Pro Suspension is that really, I mean, it was made for kind of those higher speed off-road occasions. And so when you're just cruising down the highway at 70 miles an hour, it's like you're floating on a cloud. So it's really great to drive. One of the drawbacks, though, that I will say is that there's essentially no bolstering on these seats, and the seats are really wide, so they're built for Americans. You know, this is built in America for Americans, so the seats are huge. And if you're really kind of trying to drive this in any sort of spirited fashion, you get kind of thrown around your seat because there's no real bolstering to help kind of keep you in place. So that's actually kind of a complaint of mine if I'm taking a turn a little fast. But related to the seats, one of the other things that I've noticed is that on a longer trip, the seat bottoms they're a little hard, and I've actually had some fatigue on longer trips where it's actually become fairly uncomfortable. And I may have even mentioned this in my 1 month review of this truck. Hopefully the new models have more comfortable seats. And I mean, from day to day, these are pretty high quality seats. I mean, don't get me wrong, they're nice, but they're a little hard. So that, and then getting back to kind of trying to drive a big full-size truck in a spirited fashion, which I just can't help but do because that's kind of just who I am. The steering. So the steering, like I think a lot of large trucks, lock to lock, it takes many turns. It takes more turns, more input to do the same turning that you know, than other types of vehicles. So coming from, especially like from a sports car, and then getting in this and trying to take that same turn that you would have taken in the sports car and maybe just turned it a little bit, it's going to take more effort. And so one of the pet peeves of mine is that, and this just comes into, this is a Toyota, this plastic piece that kind of wraps around the bottom of the steering wheel. If you are trying to maneuver this vehicle and you're trying to make a turn and you're, you know, turning, the catches on the tips, on the ends of this plastic, is just really annoying to me. And I think that could have been easily adjusted so that the little lip is not right there, so that when you are making those turns that you're not catching that little plastic piece. That's a tiny little pet peeve of mine. I mean, otherwise this has been a great truck to own. It does have Apple CarPlay, and you can just, you know, plug your stuff in. If you just don't want to use Apple CarPlay or Android Auto, you can do that as well. The sound system is okay. I mean, it's nothing to write home about. It is JBL. You see the little JBL sign there. The storage in this is insane. So, I mean, this down here is just huge. So, of course, it's still mainly just a mask storage area. But there's storage galore. You can stick all kinds of stuff down in here. You can put stuff down in here. Comically though, the actual glove compartment is tiny. So that's kind of ridiculous. But the Trd Pro also has, you know, as a standard deal, you've got your tow haul, tow braking stuff there, and you've got your mode that you can, if you're towing something, you can enable that. But again, you know, there's really no extra bells and whistles that like what you would find in the new one. You can turn your traction control off, and then you've got a couple of power outlets and a USB outlet, and that's basically it. You do have dual zone climate control, and you've got, you know, automatic, of course, and we do have heated seats, so they're not cooled, but they're heated, so you can use these buttons for your heated seats. And I'm going to jump back to the back seats because that's really the selling point of the crew cab. So this is not a double cab, this is the full crew cab, and the back seats are ridiculous. So, and I'm sure you've seen this if you've watched any videos on this truck, that this might be the biggest back seat of any full-size trucks that are out there. It's just a massive amount of room. Again, since we have 3 dogs and we don't really shuttle people around, it's just usually the 2 of us, and then the dogs get to get back here. So I've kind of used another Orvis seat cover, but not in the traditional fashion that would normally sling over the seat like you saw in the Land Cruiser. I usually keep the seats up like this, and then they can just kind of lay down right on the floor. Part of the reason is that this thing is already so high off the ground that it would be nearly impossible to get the dogs to jump up into the back seat. This has a little bit more ground clearance than the Land Cruiser does, actually. I think the Land Cruiser has like 9 point something inches of ground clearance. I can't remember exactly, but I want to say that the Trd Pro ground clearance on this is 10.6 inches, I believe. So this is a lot less for our dogs to jump up into the car, and it's all about the dogs. So but yeah, so in general, we've hauled some stuff. This pallet of stones probably weighs about 300 pounds. Hauled that from up in the mountains to get those samples. We've hauled other stuff, like I filled up the entire bed with bags of mulch, and we've loaded up some other stuff. But of course, this is a short bed, so you're not gonna get, you know, a full work truck worth of stuff loaded in here. But I mean, it's a good size for the things that I need it for. And the bed liner is really high quality, so that's nice. But overall, we're greatly satisfied with both vehicles. They've been as reliable as you would expect Toyotas to be, and we don't really have any major complaints with them. In the future, so I might do some update videos once we get some of the work done on the Land Cruiser. I'm not making these videos to make money or get views or anything. I don't have any of that monetization stuff enabled, so I just am hoping that some of this information is actually useful to people who are actually thinking about pursuing one of these vehicles, and getting like a real opinion about what it's like to actually own them. So hopefully this is helpful to 1 or 2 people. And perhaps I'll do some additional longer term update videos in the future.